I've been taking baths with my roommate. Today, it escalated. My sister laughed right in my face and said, "You should have seen it coming, loser." I mean, you guys have been bathing together for months. In my defense, it started 3 months ago when I was still in a very vulnerable position, with my poor posture and my broken leg. I desperately needed help, and Joel happened to be the first contender. Casually. Then we became part of this strange system. I couldn't possibly think of saying it any other way. Then it was impossible to get out of it. Well, at least for 1 month. But that didn't stop at 1 month. However, because until then we were blissfully ignorant of how intimate our habit of bathing together was, and even if not entirely blissfully ignorant, we were good at pretending everything was good and beautiful and not sus. Now after that, how did it start? One would wonder. Well, the real story dated back to some 7 months ago when Joel had come down with a fever. This past was also important to understand why he was so eager to help the injured me 4 months later. We had been roommates for some 2 years then, and with a few people to rely on, we had become good friends. The evening before he got sick, we had gone out on a trip during peak winter. We'd shared one ride with a rather sick individual, and the next thing we knew, Joel was sick. We returned, and for the next 12 days, I took care of him. From cooking to cleaning, it was all on me. As guilty as Joel felt about it, he really wasn't in the state to help me, despite the claims he made in those days. But that weirdly had left a good impression on our friendship. So when I fractured my leg in a car accident 4 months later, he promised to help me out. Obviously, at first, everything was limited to the same duty as I had, cooking and cleaning, and making sure I had my medicine. But then on day 2, when I realized not bathing was not an option, I informed Joel that I was planning to take a bath. Hygiene mattered to me. It was somewhere between 9 in the night, and Joel had just returned from his evening jogs. It was Saturday. He was at home. It was for that reason I decided on this activity. If something were to happen, or if I needed help, it would be easier to ask. That was what I had thought. Joel seemed a little skeptical at first, but then he asked if I could holler if I needed his help. I showed him a thumbs up and hopped into the bathroom on my good leg. I understood how hard it was to actually brush my teeth then. I had to lean against the wall for support all the time. It was ridiculous. Then came the shower. Now, even though I knew there was no way I was going to be able to finish it without fucking it all up, I still undressed to my underwear and hopped into it, only to slip and nearly fall in the process. As Joel had suggested, I hollered his name and he came rushing in after asking if I was decent. He came in, helped me up, and reminded me that I should be more careful now. I nodded at him, still had to shower, so resignedly and awkwardly, Joel proposed he could help me with it. I didn't know what to answer, and my sleep-riddled mind and body thought little about how weird it would look and sound to an outsider. Regardless, I nodded at him, and that was it. That was how I bathed on the 3rd day of my car accident. When I woke up the next day, I realized even our 2 years of friendship and closeness wouldn't be enough to explain what the hell happened last evening. Soon after returning from the bathroom, Joel had left me alone to dress up in peace and privacy. He made soup and gave me one of the 2 bowls. We drank our soup in silence, and then he left me to sleep. It was awkward as hell, but not awkward enough for it to not happen again and again after that. The first week, it was weird. I still remember how conflicted I felt each time. I asked him for his help, but my body had grown familiar with his touch and care. And even though it felt bad to bother him every day, I couldn't help but think about the safety. He'd make sure I didn't fall, and at that moment, that was exactly what I needed. Then it got better. No, not my shower stuff, but my leg. By the end of the first month, I was good enough to do stuff on my own. I still needed to be careful, but I could have lived my life without spending another day in the shower with Joel. But did that happen? No. If that had happened, then I wouldn't be facing the crisis I was currently facing. Because when I still had a plaster on my leg, Joel started showering right after me. And then, as no one would expect, with me. We'd still be in our underwear, but bath together. Touch when necessary and not talk much. Then we'd go our separate ways and never return to talk about it. Then the next day would come, and it would all be repeated. It went on like that for the next 1.5 months. Nothing happened. We avoided looking at places we shouldn't, showered and made it out of the bathroom well and alive. Nothing happened, and so, even though it still seemed senseless, we sort of got comfortable in this system. We even started talking a little. But then the 3rd month came and something happened that reminded us, even if we talked while showering, it was still weird as heck. On this particular day, while showering, we were talking about our respective work issues when I slipped and fell. Unfortunately, Joel started laughing hysterically. I couldn't fathom why he was laughing. "You enjoy bathing with me so much you're gonna break something again?" he chortled. I laughed with him but still glared at him. But it was not serious. I was only glad that I didn't fall on my still recovering side. Stupidly and weirdly, I couldn't help but drag him down with me. I didn't know what I was aiming for, but when he fell down on top of me, I stopped laughing. He kinda did too. I had planned to shame him, but it appeared I had created another problem. He was between my legs, and thank God we were not naked, but even then, I could feel his breathing right on my cheek. If that wasn't enough, Joel looked curious yet cautious. About what? I couldn't tell. When it looked like he'd kiss me, I pulled my face away, and that was the end of it. For some months, Joel didn't pull away from me. It was almost as if I looked at him again, something would have happened. He cleared his throat and then pulled away. He said he would leave first, and I nodded at him. When he left, I sighed and leaned against the glass door. Oh God, what were we doing all this time? I got up, cleaned myself again, and ran into my bedroom. I didn't want to face him. So I called my sister Sue, and she reminded me that we've been showering together for so long. She wasn't exactly surprised. I mean, she began and stared right at me as I made my bed. "It's not like anything happened, right? Right, Bryan?" By now, her laughing had subsided. I could still see the redness in her face, though. One wrong word, and she'd start howling with laughter all over again. I didn't want Joel to get the wrong idea. "Nothing happened," I replied with a red face. "It's still weird." "I mean, how wouldn't it be?" I asked. "I'm not saying I'm having another gay crisis right now over him, but what if he isn't gay? Bri, I don't want to project, but I don't think any straight man would be willing to do what Joel has already done for you." Sue had a point, and I'd never particularly wondered about the details of our system. But still, nothing that happened between us in the past was an indicator of him being attracted to me. Sure, one would look at our showering history and say otherwise, but what else was there? When I told this to Sue, she started counting. I hadn't seen that coming. "You guys cook and clean for each other," she said. "We're working adults, we expect that out of each other." "Oh," she said and rolled the word in her mouth. "Then what about going to hell and back to make sure the other person is comfortable and stuff, when sick or broken?" She had a point. At this point, you'll deny everything that I say, so why not just see for yourself? Wait it out. I'm sure Joel has something to say. Joel had only girlfriends until now. If there was one thing he was going to say, it was most likely going to be an apology for what happened earlier. Joel helped because he was a decent and kind person. There was nothing else. Sue was projecting. But even when I said and thought those things, I couldn't help but wish and hope it was the opposite. Joel was a handsome man. Added to that was his charming personality and caring attitude. And he made for a perfect boyfriend recipe. I couldn't even achieve that, however. Joel was my roommate and not my boyfriend, regardless of what my sister always believed about us. And now after that almost kiss, I wondered how our future interactions were going to go. Soon after I'd ended the video call with my sister, Joel knocked on my bedroom door. I was still in a shirt, so I quickly put on my pajamas and called him in. "Hey," he said. "Hey," I replied. He rolled his tongue against his teeth and made a little sound. "I was wondering if you'd like to go out for a walk." It was Sunday, and you wanted to go out for a walk? I looked at the time. It was past 11. It would be nice to have a walk, help relieve the stress and everything else. He had his hands behind his back. He looked demure. It was a strange, new look on him. "We can come back soon if you'd like. I know with your leg, you cannot put a lot of pressure on it." "Yep. Okay, we can go." My leg was not as bad as it was 3 months ago, and the doctor suggested that I keep walking. Light movements would be good for my leg, she had told me. "I just need to change. Maybe?" "You look good already," he said and pointed at me. "People do walk outside their homes in pajamas. If you don't know that already, Bryan." I rubbed my nape. I knew that. Half an hour later. It was during the walk that Joel actually talked about what had happened. He looked nervous, almost as nervous as I felt, but I reminded myself that if he felt at least a bit disgusted with our showering arrangement, he would have never offered it or continued it after I got better. But the truth was that he had done so, and I was left with nothing to do or think but to hear him out. Whatever it was, I was sure I was ready, but I was not. I was expecting him to talk about how it was a mistake and how he wasn't sure why he said yes in the first place at all. Or he didn't know he continued with it. And while he did say some of that, he said something more. And that extra bit was shocking to me. I mean, I've only dated girls before, but I understand I'm not only attracted to them, he said. And even though he did say that, he didn't really look like he was convinced by what he had just confessed. I gave him the time to speak because I wasn't really sure what to reply. I already knew about his dating history. In the past 2 years, we had shared almost everything about our private lives with each other. But then I helped you shower for a month or so, and I didn't feel weirded out by it. Then I continued showering with you, and I don't know why. Okay, I said. What was I supposed to say to that? Thank you. I'm glad to hear that. What could have I said? I wasn't sure. And I realized he understood that too. Should we go back? I asked. There aren't many people around, and I didn't want to get mugged. Besides, it was kind of getting cool, and I wasn't sure I wanted to hear anything about that moment anymore. I was slightly disappointed, but that was perhaps because I was hoping for far too much. It was then that I realized I had been hoping for far too much for the last 2 years. I was wondering, he began when he turned to move, how rude it would be to ask you if we could move past that. Move past what? I asked and turned to him. The stuff that happened in the shower. I swallowed at the same time he did. He was nervous, but I was heartbroken. As surprising as that was for me, I was sure as hell sad over him saying that. Well, at least I wasn't confused why that was so. Okay, I said. Okay, he repeated, weirdly. He looked upset. I didn't have the heart to wonder if that was so. As far as I knew, I had something of a crush on him. So if anyone was hurt by his proposal, then it was me. That's it? Well, what do you want me to say? Nothing happened between us, so there's really nothing to forget. I was coming ruder than I wanted to, but the words were out, and Joel had already registered the tone. There was really nothing that I could have done to take it all back. So I kept my mouth shut, hoping he'd take the hint. Well, he said, a little more upset now. That's right, let's go. Tomorrow we both had our respective jobs to return to. Thinking that was annoying and stressful already, I didn't want to add this unnecessary and stressful drama between Joel and me. It wasn't like we had actually done anything. A few days later, awkwardness had managed to seep into every fiber of our lives. We would be busy with our jobs from the morning to the evening, and then we'd return home, speak a few words to each other. We'd stayed together for 2 years by then, and it wasn't a normal thing at all. It was suspicious, and it was happening very fast. On the first day, as always, Joel cooked for me. We divided our duties, so Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesdays were his responsibility. Thursday, Friday, and Saturday were mine. On Sundays, we shared that responsibility. According to that rule, Joel should have cooked something on Tuesday. He didn't, but I didn't say anything. I didn't think we were ready for that kind of banter so soon. But then he didn't do that on Wednesday either. I was angry and upset and hungry. Instead of saying anything to him, I changed and went into the kitchen to cook. I made sure to bang every utensil that I could find while cooking. Was I being passively rude? Yes, I was, and I loved every second of it. I was upset at Joel for not talking to me. I was upset at him for not fulfilling his responsibilities. And I was upset at us that something so little had threatened our friendship. It wasn't like we actually kissed. What the hell? As expected, Joel came rushing into the kitchen. He looked sick and his clothes were sweaty. I would have thought he was exercising, but it didn't look like that. I curiously looked at him, my anger long forgotten, and he weakly smiled at me. I'm sorry, he said. I've been feeling a little down since the afternoon. I thought I should take a nap. He rubbed his nape. Let me help you. You should rest, I replied, and wailed my irritation away. Joel did look sick, so it wasn't fair to get upset at him. I will cook for the both of us. Have you taken something? No, I'm hoping it will get better on its own. That was an issue with him. Joel hated medicines, and only I knew how much I'd struggled in those 12 days months ago. Then go and rest. I will cook. It's all right, he said. I will help. He carefully grabbed the knife from my hand and stood next to me to cook. It's been time since we cooked together. I didn't want this on my conscience. He was sick and he needed to rest. Go, Joel. Bryan, he said softly, but I could hear the warning in his tone. Please let me help you. You're tired. It's my day anyway, so let me help you. Or we could order something, I suggested, to get out of this sticky situation. Just when I moved to leave the kitchen, he moved too and cornered me. His figure, only a few inches taller than me, seemed to loom over me. He was sick. He shouldn't have looked so daunting. "Why don't you listen to me?" he asked, sounding genuinely curious. "I do listen to you," I replied. "Then," he said, and sighed. Daring as he was, his eyes moved to my mouth. "Then what?" I challenged. "Then why aren't we talking? Why is everything so damn awkward between us?" He sounded confused, and I didn't possibly know how to move around this confusion. What did he want me to reply to that? Although not obvious, I had a romantic inclination towards him, but his words and his behavior told me it wasn't the same for him. On top of that, he had taken a special walk with me to tell me that he didn't want to think about that shower incident anymore. What was I to think about that? Obviously, things were going to stay awkward for a while. But even though I thought like that, I didn't know if he wanted to hear that. So I said the first thing that came into my head, and it might not have been the best answer, sure, but it was out. "You want to pretend you didn't shower the gay dude for 3 months? And I'm not going to force you to relive that memory. I'm in." "You were injured," he said, as if that explained the next 1.5 months of us showering together and seeing each other wet in our underwear. "Yeah, sure, and I don't want to think about it, not because you're gay, but..." He stopped and furrowed his eyebrows. "It wasn't because you're gay," he said slowly this time, as if he were thinking through his words carefully. "But because I wanted to kiss you." "Oh?" I blinked at him. Weirdly, despite the slight height advantage, he looked smaller than me, but that was probably because of his haunched shoulders. "Yes, that was the reason." He nodded his head and finally looked at me. It was almost like this was a revelation for him, and it was funny because I believed that happened to him a long time ago. See, we weren't really on the same plane here, and because it was so new to me, I kind of freaked out. I thought not thinking about it would be the best course of action, but now things were awkward between us as if we hadn't been friends for 2 years. Now it was very obvious that he'd only dated women before, but was I his bi-awakening at his big age of 34? Or was it 35? Did he even know that? I wasn't so sure about any possible answer. "So what now?" I asked. "You want to kiss me to see if it still works?" I joked. He furrowed his brows. "I'd love to, but I don't want to play with you like that." What I thought. Where was he going with that? I'm pretty sure you need a stable relationship at this age, and I'm not some bum who'd make everything 10 times worse for you. I didn't think of it that way, but I didn't want to challenge him either. I simply nodded my head at him. And he asked me if we should cook together or order something. I chose the latter one. I needed time to think about this all. But then the order arrived and we sat down to eat, and he leaned over to wipe the sauce off the corner of my mouth. And he accidentally slipped, and our lips touched for the briefest of seconds. It was almost like the universe wanted us to kiss. Because how the hell could one slip in that position? We stared at each other in silence. And when I felt he might want to kiss me again, given his heavy breathing and curious and confused expression, I tried to push him again. He'd only confessed an hour ago. He didn't want to use me, and I was sure it would break his heart if he ended up doing exactly that. Considering his kind and sweet personality, I didn't want to do that. But he leaned in again, and this time we properly kissed. As I'd expected, his kiss was more exploratory than passionate, but kissing him felt so nice and right. Then my brain stopped working for a few minutes. I was desperate to kiss him so much that I didn't think much about how it would affect either of us. I could vouch for myself that I would have kissed him, but I couldn't say the same for him. So as he kissed me, and as his hand turned a little brave, I pulled back. I literally had to force myself to do that, but I managed to pull back. He seemed disappointed at that, but that realization struck in his face and he panicked. He got up, walked into his bedroom, and locked himself in. I sat in silence for a while, my heart wanting to go back to kiss him, but I looked for my phone and called Sue. The moment she picked up, I screamed into the phone. A few days later, after that little kiss situation, I knew things weren't going to be the same for Joel and me. We weren't really seeing eye to eye, and we both knew that was going to serve as an issue. We were in our 30s, and well, finding something like this at that age did seem a little daunting in thought. I found out about myself in my late teens. I'd grown used to being gay by the time I met and befriended Joel, but it wasn't the same for him. For all I knew, I was wondering about all this stuff. He was busy freaking out. Come to think of it, we hadn't really talked to each other since that night. We finished our responsibilities, said hi or bye whenever we met, and that was it. A few days passed like that, and then Sunday arrived. Joel knocked on my door. I called him in. He asked if I wanted to go eat. We aren't cooking today? I asked, despite the awkwardness lingering between us. No, I just wanted to treat you. I wanted to talk about something. Okay, I said. My tone sounded a little doubtful. It's important, he added. What could be better than discussing it over dinner? Well, I said and licked my bottom lip. His eyes seemed to follow that movement. I flushed a little. Let me get ready then. Where are we going? We went to a restaurant. It wasn't a high-end restaurant, no. But it was a decent place, and the staff seemed friendly. We ordered and Joel looked at me. He crossed his hands over the table before he finally spoke up. While I was excited about eating something good after a long time, I couldn't exactly dispel the nervousness in me. Joel looked determined and slightly worried, but this had to happen, so he finally spoke up. I'm looking for another place. That was actually news for me. Never in 1,000 years had I expected him to say that of all things. I looked at him in confusion. I sure as hell looked dumbfounded. What was he saying? Or was he going to find another place to rent in this weather and this economy? Wow, I said, and that was all that I could mutter. Joel wrung his hands tighter. I could see the bulging veins in his hands. I don't know, Bryan, but things have gotten pretty messy between us. I do accept a lot of it is my mistake, but I do believe even then, I don't want to hurt you more than I have already done. That was the old dialogue. He said that to me 1,000,000 times by now. I didn't think you were the running type. My tone was bitter. I'm not, he said, but I don't want to do anything that would possibly hurt you. He seemed to believe that. What you're currently doing is hurting me, Joel, I replied with intent. We've been friends for so long, and we've taken care of each other through thick and thin, and now you're letting that small thing jeopardize everything between us. I'm not jeopardizing anything, he muttered. We're still gonna be friends. Don't make me laugh, I replied, bitterly yet again. We haven't been talking properly to each other since that shower thing, and the actual kiss happened, and now you avoid me like you can't stand the sight of me. And that is hurting me, Joel. How are we going to stay friends under different roofs if we cannot even talk to each other in the same home? He swallowed. We can try, right? I sighed and leaned against my seat. I closed my eyes. I wanted to get out of here as soon as possible. I could feel an oncoming headache, and my hands were itching to call or text my sister to discuss this with her. It was her fault. She'd filled my head with fantasies of finally dating my roommate. She ought to make it better now that there seemed zero chances of that ever happening. See, Joel said, it's not like I hate this part of me. I don't even doubt it anymore, that I may like you more than as a friend. But this is happening too fast for me. I do not understand myself any better now. But all I want is to kiss you all the time. It's honestly kind of overwhelming for me. But I don't want to put you in a position where you'll have to go through it all over again. You cannot decide for me, I replied, a little softer this time. I understood him. A long time ago, I just accepted my interest in folks of my sex. I'd freaked out too. Every guy then seemed like a potential boyfriend, and I couldn't stop getting a crush on every other handsome and kind man. It was overwhelming for me, and that was the precise reason my first relationship was so messy. But we are older now, and we are past that shit. No one wanted to deal with a stupid partner at this age. A comfortable relationship seemed more secure and doable. Besides, what Joel had said almost sounded like a confession. Didn't he just say he liked me? Didn't he say he wanted to kiss me at every chance? But I still didn't want to make this any worse than it already was, so I said the first thing that came into my head. You know, a few weeks ago, Sue sent me a link, I said. Oh? Joel perked up, probably relieved that we were past that conversation. Sure, it's fanfiction about us. I giggled a little. No way, Joel laughed with me. In fact, she was the one who made me realize I might have a crush on you. The words were out long before my brain caught up to what I just confessed. I slapped a hand over my mouth and stared at him in shock. My face was flushed red, and so was his. Joel cleared his throat. Oh, wow. What hurt me wasn't his response, but the fact that he didn't stop looking for another home. I'd see him scrolling through different websites or contacting different brokers, but I'd never really noticed him thinking through what I'd let slip from my mouth. That hurt me. 2 weeks later, silence seemed to penetrate every fiber of our lives again. Our shared apartment seemed so silent now that it felt like he'd already left. It was unbearable. After returning from work, I'd leave to either go on a walk like an old man or the nearest pub. It seemed to have become a habit. We still fulfilled our respective duties and still shared a few exchanges, but it still seemed awkward. I was sure if we went another week without talking, it'd end our friendship. Thankfully, something happened and it prevented that from happening. Unfortunately, though, it cost me physical bruises. It was 2 weeks since that restaurant dinner when Joel asked if he could come with me to the pub. He'd packed his stuff and told me he'd found a decent enough one-room apartment somewhere. The place was nearly 2 hours' drive from our current home. I checked. It was depressing. It seemed like the end of our friendship. Yes, that's fine. The walk to the pub was mostly silent. The most we talked about was our jobs, and he discussed how he'd planned to commute now. It was going to be a little more troublesome now. And whose fault was that? I nearly asked him. Commuting is always hectic, especially at peak hours, he added. I nodded my head, and it was back to silence. We reached the pub, ordered our drinks, and watched the other people being happy. I didn't want to say it, but it was depressing. Why couldn't I be happy? 15 minutes into it, Joel excused himself. I told him the washrooms weren't the cleanest here, and that he should be careful. He showed me a thumbs up and stumbled his way into the washroom. I expected the rest of the evening to pass as smoothly, but when I got in trouble with a particularly burly and flirty man, I knew fate wasn't on my side today. What a messy situation I was in. The stranger offered me a drink first. When I refused it, he insisted that I drink it. He was sure I'd like his favorite drink. He insisted even then. I told him I wasn't interested in that, I was here with a friend. But the man didn't want to accept that. He seemed like the kind of man women often complained about. I sympathized with all the women yet again. I shook my head at him and turned away from him. I was sure that it was a clear sign of disinterest, but he didn't seem to take that as such. He instead growled and violently pushed me away. I stumbled and hurt myself. The bartender smoothly sneaked away from there. He'd probably seen this movie 100 times by now and probably didn't want any part in it. What the hell is wrong with you, man? I hissed at the stranger. You didn't say no to Carlos, the man growled, and moved to punch me. And he did. My problem was that I had never raised my hand at any person. Such a situation had never come my way. Not even when I had revealed that I was gay to the outside world. So each time I tried to hit him back, he blocked my hits and hit or punched me in return. Was this how I was going to be treated after saying no? What kind of world were women living in? I asked myself again. By the time help came in the form of a familiar figure, I was bruised and broken, embarrassed and humiliated. I was near tears, while Joel and the bodyguards dealt with the man. I stumbled my way out of there. He had hit me in my leg, the same one that was still tender. I was some distance away from the pub when Joel cut up to me. He seemed breathless and was donning a bruise near his mouth. I was sorry for him, but not as sorry as I felt for myself and the situation. Bryan, he said breathlessly. Bryan, how are you? What do you think? I hissed. Now I was upset with him. He was leaving me tomorrow and I didn't want him to act like he cared. If he actually cared, he wouldn't be in this pub in the first place. If he actually cared, I wouldn't be drinking myself for mourning the loss of a good friendship. If he actually cared for me and my feelings, he wouldn't be running away from me. I should have come sooner, he said, but the line was so long. I don't care, Joel. Let's just get home. They're going to bring him to the cops, Joel told me. He's going to get it, I said. I don't care, I repeated. Bryan, you're hurt. Let's order a cab. No, I told him. It's going to cost us a fortune. I can walk. Bryan, he said desperately. I'm sorry. What are you sorry for? He let out a heavy sigh and held my hand before I could walk another step. Bryan, things are difficult as it is, and I don't want to make anything worse. Uh-huh, I replied. I cannot let you live alone. He covered my hand with his own. I can't risk not seeing you for a day. I can't risk not knowing how you're doing, he sighed, and played with my fingers. I wanted to leave, and I have my stuff packed and everything. But I don't want to leave. I want to stay with you. It was a decision you made, I reminded him tiredly. Yes, and I regret it. It seems nonsensical to run away from you. Uh-huh. I'm a grown-up man, and I don't want to run away from happiness or even sadness. Living with you makes me happy, and so does kissing you. I wanted to run away because I was so worried that I was trying to risk everything for something that happened only a few weeks ago. But our history goes way back. 2 years, Bryan. It's not just 3 weeks or 4 weeks. If I felt any weird about you, I wouldn't have showered with you for 3 months. I wouldn't have wanted to kiss you, but the truth is that I do. And what's the point of running away from it all when you want the same? And today I saw you get hurt, and He stopped and swallowed. I realized I couldn't let it happen again. I mean, I'm sure you can defend yourself very well, but I want to be there regardless. Okay, I replied. I wasn't sure what to say. I'm afraid, though, he said again. I'm afraid that doing that will compromise your comfort and your happiness. You've already been through all of this and you have to go through it again. You said you're okay with what you feel about me, I reminded him. Yes, but I've never dated a guy before. I've never slept with one. He dropped my hand and crossed his arms over his chest. His eyes were downcast. And if we do something about it, you'll have to be my, I don't know, teacher? You'll have to guide me and be patient with me, and I don't want you to deal with all of that. I'm no teenager. It's never too late, Joel, I answered. People learn at their pace. But have you ever wondered if I had a problem with that? I asked. No, he answered. I mean, yes, but maybe I was projecting? Maybe, I agreed. See, I'm not saying it's going to be easy for me, or for you, but at least you'll not have to go through all of that all alone. We don't even have the time to brood over it so much. We're living paycheck to paycheck after all, and running away is not a solution, he said. And running away is not a solution, I agreed and nodded at him when he finally looked at me. If it doesn't work out, then we can stay friends, but if you like me and I like you, then it wouldn't hurt to give it a try. He sniffled and nodded. He then sighed and ran a hand through his hair. What? I asked. Well, now I'll have to unpack. I shrugged at him. Oh, Jesus, he muttered and rubbed a hand through his hair again. We're really gonna try it? He asked. If you want, I said. Yeah, I'd like that. He nodded and swallowed. You can kiss me as much as you want too, I proposed. Oh, he said, and his eyes brightened a little. That's awesome. I shrugged and smiled into the soft kiss. He tentatively pressed against my lips. Your sister's gonna love this, he said, and helped me balance as we resumed our walk to our shared home. Yup, she's finally gonna write happy stories. Wait, she wrote sad ones? I nodded. Most of them ended on a sad note. Hopefully not anymore. Hopefully, I agreed. Conclusion. I couldn't say why exactly it was, but our relationship wasn't as chaotic as my sister had expected. Sure, Joel was a lot shyer than usual around me, now that we were secretly boyfriends, but it seemed to work as well as a perfectly oiled machine. As promised, we started slow. One day, Joel suggested we start showering again, but then we thought, no, maybe not now. We were sure going to cross the boundaries that I was sure Joel was not ready for, but that would come with time. Sue was sure that that would happen. She was sure I was going to tell her every detail, so that she could infuse it all in her fanfictions. I was not. The end. How willing are you to risk your friendship with a longtime friend for a possible relationship? Let us know in the comments below. Thanks for watching. Consider subscribing to become part of our Rainbow Force and stay wholesome.